This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. And before we jump in and I introduce my guest, we have a sponsor that we want to highlight and mention, America's Christian Credit Union. They're based over in California. I got some great friends over there that work there, and they've been open for 65 years, serving Christians from all over the country. Specifically, they love working with schools, which is why they wanted to sponsor this podcast. And they do a lot of banking services, tuition financing programs for specifically, of course, schools who are looking to reduce their risk and administrative burden. Now, one of the really cool things about this that I was talking with them about is if you guys are a private school that is listening to the podcast right now and you have a hard time chasing families who maybe aren't the best at paying on time, and you're like, man, what am I going to do about this? I'm spending so many hours chasing after them to try and make sure they pay so you guys can pay your bills. They offer tuition financing plans for your family so that the families can go and get that from the bank directly, and you don't have to worry about chasing money because they're getting it through the bank. So you will always get paid 100% of what your tuition is. So if you're interested, you can check them out online. It's americaschristiancu.com, americaschristiancu.com/schools. Go check them out online and get to talking with them. They're great, great people, and I love working with them. So as we dive in today, guys, we have a new guest that I want to introduce you to. He's located in my home state that I'm recording this today in beautiful, sunny Florida, and it's Matt Peavyhouse, and he is the head of school at Tampa Bay Christian Academy, of course, in the great city of Tampa Bay, and I'm super stoked to talk with him. Him and I have talked for already hours before we've even recorded this podcast, so we know we could talk for a long time. We're going to try and keep it short and sweet today, just so we don't want to bore anybody with our small talk there, Matt. So I'm going to pass it off to him to actually introduce himself, and then we'll jump right in. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Mitchell. It's an honor. I look forward to talking. Like you said, I can definitely gab, and so I'm looking forward to sharing what's going down and what's happening here in Tampa Bay and with Tampa Bay Christian. I'm always up to talking about great things going on with your school.
Love it. Well, I always say this, even though I know Tampa, I have an aunt that lives in Tampa. It's only a couple hours from where I live. I always like to ask, if I was to visit where you are, Tampa Bay, what would you say, Mitchell, when you come, you got to do this when you're in Tampa Bay? What would you say we got to do?
Oh, man. So our neighborhood, we're in Seminole Heights, which is the kind of bohemian, eclectic, whacked out neighborhood of Tampa. And so I would encourage just hanging out in some of the local places. So Ybor City is around the corner. You can't go wrong except for at certain times. Certain times, maybe not Ybor, but you got to check out the Columbia. That's the biggest thing. Good old Columbia restaurant, 1907. It's been around forever. It's a great place, great food. A great family owns it and runs it. And so I'd encourage you to do that in Tampa.
Love it. I love experiencing places through food. So that's my weakness. I don't typically go places and buy a t-shirt or a keychain. I'm like, I just want to buy the food, try it through the food. So you won me already. So I got to go there the next time I'm over in Tampa. So give me a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today? Background in education, where you grew up and all that.
Yeah, so I grew up actually a suburb of Tampa, Brandon. It is the largest unincorporated city in the United States. If it incorporated and the surrounding neighborhoods to Brandon, it would be larger than Tampa in population. And that was true years ago. I don't know if that's true. As the city has grown, Tampa used to have nothing at night. It just became dead. But I grew up in Brandon. I grew up in the area, loved it, went to high school here. I'm actually a public school kid. I went all the way through public school. My family, all in the area. Ended up starting college at University of Tampa, small private school here in town. But I always wanted to be a Seminole, and they had a great program. I started off as a music major, music theater, and went to writing and I would write plays And so transferred to Florida State as a playwright. Near my senior year, my dad happened to be driving me back to school. So my car had broken down and he said, "Hey, there's a lot of unemployed actors in the world." He said, "Since every play only has one writer, don't you think there are a lot of unemployed playwrights?" It's like, thanks, Dad. Like 3 years into college, this would have been useful information a little sooner. But no, he really pushed me that I look at what else I was going to do. And so I added education to the classes I was taking, ended up graduating, becoming a teacher, teaching writing for a number of years, getting into teaching reading, specifically for the middle school and high school, struggling readers. And I loved it. I loved working with those students. Public school, I had the opportunity to leave teaching, but to look into pastoral. I'd always wanted to look at being a pastor, and had an opportunity for a church that had a school that they hired me to be their youth pastor. And I had done that for years and done camps and music festivals and stuff like that. So I hung out with kids and worked at the school for a few years. And that actually was this school. It was this school 20 years ago. It was called Tampa Baptist Academy at the time. And so I was there for 3 years as their youth pastor, ended up leaving there to go to seminary because I figured, I need some education in this. And so went and began a master's of divinity there, proceeded after that to plant a church in Louisville and then plant a church in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. And so spent my life doing that and starting businesses and starting churches, and decided as my kids were getting ready to go into high school that we wanted them to graduate in our hometown and go to school in our hometown. And so my wife and I decided to move back, and we're going to look at starting a school. And we happened to, the head of school at the time here at TBCA was a friend of mine from the years previously. And I was invited to come in and to kind of be a consultant and hang out with them for a year and help them as a school, and then move on to start a school in the south part of the county. Late turn of events ended up at the end of the year that the school separated from that head of school, and they asked me to come in as an interim and then hired as a head of school. And so I've been here now. This is my 4th year as head of school. And so it's an exciting time. I've known this school for years. My aunt actually was involved in the church that helped start it. 65-year-old school, lots of history, and it's a great story. There's God's providence in taking care of the school and getting us to this point, and our connection to it. We love it here. My whole family's involved in the school. So.
Love it. Love it. Well, obviously things are going good. I know you and I have talked about this before we started recording. So before we jump into all the really good things, I would love to hear first and foremost some challenges. Obviously you're there, 4 years as head of school. What are these challenges you guys are kind of currently up against, but how are you combating those? We don't want the woe is me, here's our problems, but hey, what are we doing to get over these challenges, and hoping that other schools that are listening might be going, oh, I have that same challenge. Let me hear how Matt is handling that one.
Yeah, so I'd separate into two things. So to give you a perspective of where we are, I think you have to know where we come from. So I would say 5 years ago that the school was my year here was the worst year I've had in education. It was just really hard. It was the tough school, tough situation. There's a lot of problems going on in the school. And so I inherited that. And not immediately, but 6 months later, we're in the middle of a pandemic as well. And so the struggle, talking enrollment and admissions and all that, we had 45% re-enrollment that year. Average, which if you're like all of your listeners that know private schools, you don't survive that. That's not a number you can get through. And so we have really worked to craft a great team, provide great education, and to really hone in on who, to use the church language, who the TBCA Tom is. Like we say that, who's the student that goes here? And so we really focused our school. At the time I came in, there were 3 mission statements hanging on the walls. And so we honed that. We said, what are we here for? And so we decided we're here to partner with families, that we're going to educate students first and foremost. So we partner with families to educate the mind, engage the heart, and empower world changers. And so that became our focus as a school. And we do all that through a relationship with Jesus Christ as a Christian school. But those are what we're doing. And if it didn't fit our mission and vision, we kind of got rid of it. And that went so far as with the pandemic hitting, I ended up getting rid of our athletic program even as a school. We're a preschool through 12th grade. And we said, no, that wasn't part of education. Like that's only an extra part. We're going to focus completely and totally on being the academic school that we need to be. And so we've done that. We've seen an incredible turnaround. So right now I'm at 93% re-enrollment for next year. I will probably keep that. I mean, there's a transient nature to being urban. And so that number by August 1st will change. But according to our January 9th number, which is the day we come back and kind of how we gauge enrollment, we've hit 93% of those students are re-enrolled. So we're excited about that. We're excited about where we're going. And then our focus now, our biggest challenge to really look, most of our students come in, we focus on schools or students that are from academically disenfranchised, culturally diverse, and economically disempowered neighborhoods. And so most of our students are coming in a little behind. And we're seeing the greater challenges today, post-pandemic, is the separation between where our students are coming in and where our students are that are ours, that have been with us for a number of years. We're seeing some real dichotomy there and a spread that is challenging, to say the least, because we're starting to see kids really pick up, and the students that are with us for a number of years see great results. But the students coming in are coming again from places where they haven't been given the opportunities, but we're struggling to get them on the level that they're on. And so we're finding more and more students that we're having, after testing and after the enrollment process, looking at parents and having to say, if your student comes in on this grade level, they're likely not going to be successful here. And so we're having to move students back, and it's a challenge. That's always a challenge to parents and families. I think in the long run it'll be good, because our kids are graduating knowing what they need to know and succeeding and being the students and the young adults they need to be. And so that's probably our current challenge, is navigating that and really looking at, and future wise, looking at making database decisions on how do we grow our students and how do we work with each individual student to give them what they need to succeed.
Man, I love it. Well, you are taking these challenges and you are just kind of you're blowing them up, and you're overcoming a lot of things. I know for being 65-year-old school, like you had mentioned, you kind of inherited stuff that you had to overcome. And what blows my mind is you got rid of the athletics. And did you have a ton of pushback from families that were in there that were there for that reason?
Yeah, so that would be the school I inherited. Most of the students were there for that reason. But that had created a problem in who we were as a school, because it was like homework was a question. Like, why would we want to study something? Like, we got to have time to play football or play basketball or these other options. And so it was a real challenge. I did lose some families. I think one of the things that I'm most excited about during that time is I kept a family. I got rid of all athletics, and that year had the number one football player in the state as a student at our school. So he is voted, because the voting had happened during the football season and COVID hit, and we got rid of everything, and we did this next year as well. And he had been voted the number one 2A player in the state, top draft pick, and he went to a school that didn't have a football team at the time that he won the award. And so it was pretty interesting. We kept that family, and the reason was he was getting a great education, and that we had focused in and honed in on that, and he was having opportunities that he wouldn't have elsewhere. And so it was great for us. It was great that we were able to do that. We have since, I'll tell you, this year we started building back that program. And so it's been a challenge, that I didn't mention this, but part of that challenge is 65-year history. But 10 years ago, we lost the building that we had been a part of. We separated from our church that we were associated with for years. And so that was a real challenge. That also lost us a gym. And so that was the other drawback during pandemic time, was gym rentals went from, $40 an hour to $200 an hour. And so it all of a sudden quadrupled my budget, and was a real challenge to piece together and to make it work. And so, yeah, it was a difficult decision to make. Our board made it with me. And so it wasn't me alone. It was others involved in it. And we've come out of it and are starting to build back, and are building back a very healthy program where athletics does take a second seat to academics. Like, we're first and foremost going to educate. Now, we're going to educate physically. We want to educate our students physically. We want to empower them to be the best students they can be, and that includes athletics. But it's a secondary issue. It's not primary. Primary is our academics.
Okay. I love that you're adding it back in because that was actually my next question I was going to ask you. It was like, okay, are you ever going to add it back in? So you're slowly doing it. How do you decide that? Just let's do basketball, let's do baseball. Like, how do you decide what to add back in?
So we've traditionally been a basketball school and have been known for that, and had Division I players come out of our school, and we've been track and field. And we've had everything. We actually have a Rhodes Scholar, one of the top athletes in college in the nation, as a former graduate of ours and a partner today in many ways. And so we've looked at those sports naturally that we would add. But I'm trying next year to start a rowing team. Rowing is something that happens in Tampa because of University of Tampa has a strong row team that competes nationally. And there's a couple of our prep schools that have them, and even our public schools that have row teams because of the Hillsborough River. And so we're trying to start a row team. I said, I want every weird team in the nation or every weird team that is offering sports. Like, I want to have that team. And so I think we're also looking next year at rowing and powerlifting. And so we're looking at starting a powerlifting team as well. And it just happens we have coaches that are families in the school that have said, we'll donate all the equipment if you'll give us a place to do powerlifting. Like, I can find a place. Just give me some time. I'll figure out a place to do it.
Dang. Is Florida a state that makes it really easy for a student to go to your school and play for the local public school or another Christian school when it comes to sports? How does that work?
Not exactly. They don't make it easy. It is possible. They can play for their local home public school. There are certain circumstances where they could play for a private school. It would be student to student, the permissibility. But you can compete individually. You can compete for our school without us having a team per se. And so we've had golfers or tennis players or wrestlers. We actually have for years, we partnered with Brandon High School, which is one of the top wrestling schools in the nation. Coach Kozar, that's where I went to school. I think Brandon's the greatest team to ever play high school sports. About 30 years without a loss on the original streak. And so they are a phenomenal team. If you haven't seen it, look up the streak on ESPN and watch the story of Brandon High School. Well, they're guys that were going to go to Brandon, but were in middle school and wanted to compete on a high school level would come play for us. And so we have a number of 7th and 8th graders that won state championships wrestling for us in the 2000s. And they could wrestle independently and still go to our school because we were a K-12 school. They were allowed to compete on a high school level.
Dang, that's nuts. Were you a part of them when you were wrestling when they were on?
No, Brandon was way too good. No, the guys that I wrestle, I had great friends that did it. I make the jokes. I've always been a big guy. My best friend was the 103-pound wrestler, and he used to be able to pin me. Like, there's a quality to a Brandon wrestler. If you grew up in Brandon, you recognize the Brandon wrestlers because they do buddy runs where they pick up their buddy and run for 3 miles, and then their buddy picks them up and runs for 3 miles, and they run around Brandon doing this. I don't run, number one, unless somebody's chasing me, and I'm not carrying anybody at that moment. And so, no, I'm not that person. But Brandon wrestling is phenomenal, and so you should look it up sometime.
Okay, I just Googled it, so I have it saved on my tab. I've never heard that, so that is very interesting. I never even knew that an incorporated city. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So they lost the match. They lost a match the year my mom graduated from Brandon High School, which was the 69, 70, somewhere in there, or the early 70s. And then they lost their next match they lost was in 2007. And so it's the record for the most consecutive wins in any sport in high school in history.
Now, like, if I was to wrestle one kid and I lost, would that have counted, or it's the whole day of like the meets?
No, it's the dual meet. When you go 1-to-1 against a school, they didn't lose for 30 plus years. And then they lost in 2007, and I believe they're on the second streak. They haven't lost since they lost that one game, that one dual match in 2007. Yeah, it's phenomenal. If you like wrestling, if you ever get a chance to watch a Brandon High School match, it's fun. They love wrestling, and the kids love it, and everybody involved. Coach Kozar, I think, is retiring this year, and like for the second time, but his son's taking over, and they're just phenomenal.
Dang. Well, we heard about some challenges. I would love, I've heard some of these already of what's going good, but share with me some of the things that are going really, really good for you guys at Tampa Bay.
Yeah, we're growing like crazy. So during the pandemic, we hit 180 students, which was that's hard to survive at that point. And as a school of our size or what we had been. And so we faced that challenge. We've recovered from that and doubled in size. In that process, we also have looked at online school. We didn't necessarily do online well, and we tried to get back on campus as quick as possible because we just found that our students needed that, and they need, your students, I believe, need some form of direction and guidance. More guidance than necessarily instruction, but they need somebody to kind of guide, hey, have you looked here, look there? And so been pushed in those directions and prodded and moved in that. And so we found that true of our students. And so we came back as quick as possible, but we found that there's a real need for online education. And there's a lot of students that want that. And unfortunately, in Florida, it's monopolized by Florida Virtual School. Really is your option. And they've been around forever. They have the history. And so what we did is we partnered an organization that's almost as old as them, Stride K-12, a large for-profit independent organization that's been doing online education for years, great training. And we've partnered with them with a company called Faith Academics to create Faith Prep Academy of Florida, which is an online Christian school. It's very much a hybrid model in the younger grades. So there's a lot of homeschool-ishness to it. Like there's a teacher who's guiding, but there's also stuff they're doing at home while they're doing this. We're looking at beginning faith pods is what we call them. So branching out into other cities and creating kind of hubs that students can go to and connect with students. And so we've seen some success there. We're hoping that the opportunity would be extended for the scholarships that we take for students to work online. That would be huge. Again, that to kind of break up the monopoly of what Florida Virtual is and to give options to parents is our real reason for that. So we've done that. We're also looking at starting micro schools, and we actually have our first micro school starting, which is a middle school up near the University of South Florida, a neighborhood, again, that focuses on, that's academically disenfranchised. Most of the students in the neighborhood have to travel 45 minutes by bus to go to their middle school. And so we're looking at starting a small 100-student middle school right in the middle of the neighborhood and focusing on reaching students that wouldn't have an opportunity. There's no private school near there. It's a community that has many immigrants and refugees that come to Tampa, move to that neighborhood. And so we're looking for those opportunities and to work with those students. And then as a proof of concept, to be able to prove that we can do this and we can go into schools or churches and organizations and partners around the city and set up these micro schools that focus on a small niche. And we've focused on middle school because we think it's one of the hardest ages to teach. And we have some great public school, private schools that are elementary schools. And we have some great high schools in the area, but everybody struggles with middle school. And so we've kind of taken that on as a challenge and said, we're going to create great middle schools and we're going to be the very best we can be in that area. And so we're seeing some great success in that. And so we've got our first students for next year. And so we'll be having that campus, and we're looking to do that with about 10 campuses throughout, or 10 different neighborhoods that we've kind of targeted as neighborhoods where we could put these schools and look to reach students and eventually have them feed into our high school and grow our high school as well through that.
And your plan for that is you're still going to be just the main one head of school and just have that run by teachers, or is there going to be a tiny like head of school for each of these?
Yeah. So each one we're calling them right now the school administrator. And so they would kind of run the academic and the operations side of their campus. We are looking at them as player coaches as we grow. And so as a campus starts, it may only have 30 to 40 students on it. And so that teacher would be a player coach with the other teachers, kind of guiding that process as it grows, up to that 100 students. We would have a central services model so that all our maintenance and janitorial, our admissions, our finance, bookkeeping is all done in-house, which cuts the cost of that campus to simply supporting its teachers with the goal. My goal with that is that actually we would be able to, between our third and fourth campus, we will be able to match salaries of public at that point. And that's our goal because of the central services model, much in the same way that the schools like creating a parish model that we feed into one another. In that central services, we believe that around the fourth campus that we'll be able to match the salaries of public and be able to, we're excited about that.
That's excellent. Is it far enough away from your school though that if these students wanted to play sports for the main campus, could they, or is that a logistical nightmare?
Well, it is a logistical nightmare. Like the idea of this as we start multiple campuses is that I tell people I'm starting a bus company,
Yeah.
and that is the issue is yes, it's going to be a logistical nightmare. It's a workable and fixable logistical nightmare. And so it is not going to be my nightmare. I'm going to hand that off to somebody else who understands logistics and can do that. But yeah, it is close enough, and all these campuses would be close enough that they could come together. And our idea is that these campuses would then become bus stops for like our high school. And so you could go to one of these campuses for middle school, and then you'd also go for high school, and you picked up by a bus and taken to the high school. And so continue to make our campus kind of a one-stop shop for families, and we could do parent teacher conferences in their neighborhoods and be able to work within the places they're at.
That's awesome. It's such an exciting time in our country for like education in terms of like what the private sector is doing. Because I just feel like this is not that what you're doing is like I've heard super similar things, but not anything like close to what you're doing. Of just people going, we're going to start up a school in a neighborhood where there's not a ton of like action going on there for education, and it's because it's private. You can just do it in a way of not like going, well, we make sure we get the charter approved by the state, and you got to wait on that. It's kind of just doing it, and it's kind of just exciting to watch. And then obviously it's going to be interesting to watch as what our country's going to do with education in terms of choice and all that. It's going to be really interesting as that rolls out and what ends up.
No, I think education is going to look. So I was talking to a potential kindergarten parent at the beginning of the school year, and I said, like, I don't relish their position because their child will graduate from a very different school than what we know. I think that if you look at where schools will be 12 years from now, 13 years from now, I think they'll be in a very different place than they are now in a variety of ways. The climate is just changing in the way we do education. And unfortunately, I've seen that change is greatly affecting what would be the have-nots. And that's where we've stepped in and said, no, we're going to provide this education and this quality of education to students that would normally not be able to be in that environment. And so hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that, and God will bless that.
I love it. Love it. Well, I usually end with asking I want a piece of advice. So you've been doing this long enough. You got to have at least one, I feel like, piece of advice you can share with the school listeners that are listening. So what you got for me, Matt?
Yeah, so I'll give you my piece of advice. I'll actually give you a piece of advice in the form of a book. People should read Who Not How by Dan Sutherland and Benjamin Hardy. It is a book on my role as head of school. If I try to be the person, the who, that could do it and figure out all the how, I'll never get it done. And so I could never do my job. My job is to figure out who the who's are, who needs to be working in this, who needs to be doing this, and then get them involved in the school. And so that being said, every head of school should have a coach, should have somebody that's working for them that fills that coaching, consulting, training role that's specific to where they're actually, where they're at individually, and helping them with those programs. So that may be like enrollment and admissions. It may be looking at facilities and finding, moving your facilities management off campus and having somebody else do it. It may be, maybe another administrator that you need, or we've run very low on the top, and in order to be able to benefit our families and our students and our teachers, we have a very lean administrative staff. But there are times where I've come to, okay, like my next hire is an advancement director for administration, and so that person, I'm looking for the who that I can just hand over and say, okay, this is yours, you do this, and not micromanage them, and not let them do their job. If they're the who that you need, they know how to do their job. And so that would be my advice for heads of school and for anyone in leadership. Or we run a lot like an entrepreneurship company. And so, figure out the who is, and let them do their job for you.
Man, so I love that advice. I've actually not read that book. I've heard of that book, but I've actually not read that book yet. So I wrote it down as well to check it out. But I love that because when I'm back in the day, I feel like I'm not that old. I'm 30. I hit the 30s, but I was a youth pastor for 7 years when I lived up in Alaska, and the pastor that hired me, they didn't have a youth program. Like, he would run one once a month. Any kids that showed up, they'd do some type of youth activity. So I was interested in working for the church and starting their youth program, and he goes, I just loved his outlook on it. He hired me, and I was like, all right, so like, is there anything specific you want to do? He goes, I'm hiring you to just do you because I said, he goes, I don't know this. He goes, I'm in my 50s. He goes, you're a youth pastor,
Mhm.
like you can do it. I was at that point 21 or 22 and like, sweet. And just started and did whatever I felt was right. And I love that he never micromanaged. I remember asking if I could buy, I was like, can I buy a bus? Like, I want to buy a bus so I can take the kids to camp and stuff. And he's like, sure. So I found a cheap one from the school district that was selling it for 1,500
Oh, wow.
bucks. I bought an old bus. And then I was like, hey, can I buy bubble balls where the kids get inside and ram each other with bubble balls and stuff? And he's like,
Yeah.
sure. Like, he just never said no with stuff because I never asked something stupid crazy. And the youth group was so fun and it grew and it was just a blast. And so, like, I'm very much a proponent of what you just said of like, he found the who, like, hey, let me find this person to do it and let them do what I hired them to do. And obviously, it doesn't always work, I guess, that way. But I am a big proponent.
No, and so I've been looking at generational theory stuff, and they're starting to have a lot of questions about Gen Z wanting, because of the nature of what the pandemic has done to Gen Z in the college and high school world as they navigated that they actually want micromanagement,
What?
which is bizarre for those of us that I'm 46, so I'm way ahead of you, and I'm Gen X. And as Gen X, I hate the idea of someone even telling me what to do that's healthy and good for me. I don't like people telling me what to do. And so I hate micromanagement, and they're finding that Gen Zs are wanting that. And what they really want is they want coaching and direction. They want guidance and good scaffolding for it. And so we've had to, with our younger teachers, we've had to provide that in a deeper way than we have before and really look at how do we scaffold their leadership and help them become leaders because they're wanting, like, tell me what to do next, tell me what to do next, tell me what to do next. And yeah, so it's weird.
No, so I haven't heard that, but I have heard about with Gen Z, truly want to be cared for. Like, no, granted, everybody wants to be cared for. Okay, don't get me wrong here, but what I've heard, the studies that have come out for it, I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Is they're willing to work for less if they're a part of a company that they believe in, that they feel a part, they actually are making a difference in what they're doing and feel loved and appreciated. Which I'm like, okay, everybody wants that, but they're literally willing to work less because they just want that good culture. And so I
Yep.
would go for any school listening, like, culture is a big deal. And like multiple guests we've had on the podcast have talked about culture and how, like, it's like, you mentioned it too, almost in a way, Matt. You said there's 3 mission statements when we come in. How are you supposed to build culture around 3 missions?
Exactly.
So it's what can we get everybody to buy into to where they go, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. And like, it is a pay thing that people are not saying that's good. It's just they're willing to work less because they don't want to just be on that climb the ladder, so to speak, in corporate America.
Yeah. No, we're finding, I mean, I think that's totally true. And I see just what you like, that was the truth for our organization. Was the biggest change is that we had to make it first are cultural changes and saying, no, this is who we are. And that plays into the vision and mission and setting that clearly and saying, this is who we are. This is what we're going to live by, and live or die. This is who we are. And that's been great for us.
Love it. Well, man, I've enjoyed our chat. I love what you're doing over there in Tampa Bay, and I'm wishing you guys nothing but the best as you continue to grow. You plan all these micro campuses, and I can't wait to see what God does with you guys over in Tampa Bay. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Matt for taking time and being on the podcast today. Absolutely love what he's doing over there at Tampa Bay Christian Academy, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And I hope those micro campuses just take off and they're able to start all of those throughout those neighborhoods, because that is serving those local communities that need a school closer by to them. So that is awesome. So, Matt, wishing you nothing but the best, my friend. And I'm hoping those that are listening today, you were able to take at least one thing from today's podcast that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And maybe today's episode, maybe you could take something like, oh, maybe I need to get rid of the athletic department for a while and really focus on academics and add it back in later. Or maybe you need to look at launching a micro campus in your area because you know of neighborhoods that need a school that's close by. There's so many things out there in education with how quickly it's changing and things that are going on that I want you guys to look at those. Like, what is that next thing that's coming that you guys can tap into and start and do as a school in your area? And if you get stuck along the way or you need any help, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you, get connected with you, and help even point you in the right direction of some different partners that we have. And make sure you guys are off to great success. So please check us out online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We got links in there We're going to have, blogs. We're going to eventually have some courses. We're launching an email newsletter called the School Success Report Card. We'd love you to get that one as well. We got a lot of cool things in the works, all about serving schools and helping you guys be as successful as possible. One of those ways is we have a private Facebook group just for school leaders called School Success Makers. We'd love to see you in there. I'm personally in there. I'd love to see you in there as well. School Success Makers private group on Facebook. And another shout out to our sponsor for today's podcast, America's Christian Credit Union. You guys can check them out online on their website. I put it in the episode, but I'll put it again. It's americaschristiancu.com/schools. That is americaschristiancu.com/schools. Super thankful for their sponsorship. And if you guys are looking specifically for maybe offering tuition financing options for your families, go check them out. All right, y'all. We're going to be back here next week with another amazing guest, as usual, on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.